On a warm August night in 1997, 12-year-old Georgia Leah Moses made a phone call that would be her last. She told her friend she wouldn't be coming back that night. 9 days later, a highway worker fixing a broken guardrail would discover something that would haunt a community for nearly 3 decades. This is the story of a case that exposed every crack in a system designed to protect children. A case where a young girl's disappearance went unnoticed for over a week. A case that remains unsolved 28 years later, leaving a family desperate for answers and a killer walking free. I'm about to take you through one of California's most overlooked cold cases, the murder of Georgia Leah Moses. A story that will show you how quickly a child can slip through society's safety net and how the color of your skin can determine whether the world will remember your name. Georgia Leah Moses was born on January 7, 1985, in New York. She wasn't your typical 12-year-old. Those who knew her described her as an old soul, responsible beyond her years. She had 2 brothers and a younger sister named Angel. When Georgia was still young, she and Angel moved to Santa Rosa, California, with their mother, while her brothers remained in New York. Santa Rosa sits in the heart of Sonoma County, surrounded by rolling vineyards and farmland. It's the kind of place that feels safe, where neighbors know each other and children ride their bikes until the streetlights come on. But for Georgia and Angel, life wasn't that simple. Their mother struggled with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. According to Angel, their mother wanted to be there for them, but simply couldn't show up consistently. This left both girls bouncing in and out of the Child Protective Services system, never quite finding stability. The instability meant Georgia often had to take care of not just herself, but her younger sister too. Despite the chaos at home, Georgia took on responsibilities that no child should have to carry. She became Angel's protector, her caregiver, her constant source of comfort. Whether it was standing up to bullies at school, caring for their ill mother, or making sure Angel's hair was braided perfectly, Georgia did it all without complaint. Friends and family members remember Georgia as someone who would go out of her way to help others, even when she had so little herself. The Moses family eventually settled into a routine of sorts. They were living with their mother's boyfriend, Ian, in Santa Rosa, though Georgia frequently stayed at friends' houses when things got difficult at home. She maintained her role as Angel's guardian, checking on her younger sister regularly, always making sure she felt loved and protected. By August 1997, Georgia had been forced to drop out of middle school. The combination of family instability and her responsibilities at home made consistent attendance impossible. Yet those who knew her said she was intelligent and curious, always asking questions about the world around her. August 13th, 1997, started like any other summer day for Georgia. She spent most of the day at a friend's house, enjoying what should have been carefree summer moments. The friend later told investigators that Georgia seemed happy that day, laughing and talking about typical teenage things. As darkness fell, she walked home with Angel, just 2 sisters enjoying each other's company under the California evening sky. But then a car pulled up. Georgia recognized the driver immediately. This wasn't a stranger abduction. According to investigators, this was someone Georgia knew well, someone she would page and meet with occasionally. The relationship between Georgia and this man remains unclear, but detectives believe it wasn't romantic given her age. The man behind the wheel was described as an African-American male, between 24 and 30 years old, standing 6 feet, 2 to 6 feet 4 inches tall. Weighing approximately 200 pounds, with very short black hair. He was driving a small white 4-door car. Here's where the story takes a chilling turn. Georgia handed this man her pager, a common communication device for teenagers in the 90s. Pagers were how young people stayed connected before cell phones became widespread. After a brief exchange that Angel witnessed but couldn't hear, he handed the pager back. Georgia then walked Angel home, took extra time to braid her hair just the way she liked it, tucked her into bed, and kissed her goodnight. Angel begged her sister to take her along that night, sensing something different about the encounter. Georgia was usually protective of her younger sister, but this time she was firm. She said she couldn't bring Angel, but promised she would come back for her. It was a promise she would never be able to keep. Around 10 p.m., Georgia was back with her friend when her pager went off. The electronic beep that teens of the 90s knew so well would be the sound that sealed Georgia's fate. She used her friend's phone to return the call, speaking in hushed tones as she made arrangements to meet the same man at a nearby gas station. Her friend offered to go with her, but Georgia declined, saying she'd be fine. The friend walked with Georgia to the Chevron station on Sebastopol Road anyway, worried about her going alone so late at night. They arrived at the well-lit station around 10:30 p.m., and within minutes the small white car pulled up. Georgia's friend watched as she got into the passenger seat and the car disappeared into the darkness of Santa Rosa's quiet streets. Later that evening, around midnight, Georgia called her friend one final time from an unknown location. Her voice sounded different, strained. She said she wouldn't be back that night and that she was okay, but something in her tone suggested otherwise. Those were the last words anyone would ever hear from Georgia Leah Moses. Now here's what makes this case particularly heartbreaking and reveals the first major system failure. Georgia's mother, dealing with her own mental health challenges, assumed her daughter was staying with friends as she often did during difficult periods at home. This wasn't unusual behavior for Georgia, who sometimes needed space from the chaotic household. No missing person report was filed. No Amber Alert was issued. No search parties were organized. For over a week, this 12-year-old girl was gone, and the world didn't notice. While families across America were tucking their children into bed, Georgia was somewhere else, and nobody was looking for her. On August 22, 1997, 9 days after Georgia vanished, a Caltrans worker named Michael was fixing a broken guardrail along Highway 101 near the Petaluma Boulevard South on-ramp. It was routine maintenance work on a busy stretch of highway that connects Santa Rosa to San Francisco. As he worked in the grove of eucalyptus trees just off the roadway, about 30 feet from the traffic, he noticed something that would change everything. Hidden among the trees, partially concealed by fallen branches and vegetation, was a badly decomposed body. The discovery sent shock waves through the Caltrans crew. They immediately stopped work and called the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. Within hours, the area was cordoned off as a crime scene, with investigators carefully documenting every detail of the location. The remains were so deteriorated from 9 days in the California heat that investigators couldn't immediately determine the victim's identity, age, or even gender. The body was nude, with no clothing, jewelry, or personal belongings found anywhere at the scene. Investigators conducted an extensive search of the surrounding area, looking for any evidence that might provide clues about what happened. There were no missing person reports that matched the physical description of the remains. The Sonoma County Sheriff's Department began the painstaking process of checking dental records, hoping to establish an identity. It would take 4 more days of investigation before dental records would confirm what some investigators had begun to suspect. This was Georgia Leah Moses. The autopsy, conducted by the Sonoma County Coroner's Office, revealed the horrific truth about Georgia's final hours. She had been strangled, the medical examiner determined, likely with ligature strangulation rather than manual strangulation. She had been sexually assaulted before her death. The coroner determined that she had been dead since August 13th, the very day she disappeared. This means Georgia was likely murdered within hours of getting into that white car. Whatever happened to her occurred quickly, suggesting either that the killer had planned the attack or that something went terribly wrong during what might have started as a different kind of encounter. But here's where the system failed Georgia again, and this failure would haunt the investigation for decades. Despite having a detailed description of the suspect from multiple witnesses, despite having a specific description of his vehicle, despite the fact that this was the murder of a 12-year-old child, the investigation seemed to lose momentum almost immediately. The Sonoma County Sheriff's Department did release a composite sketch to the public. The drawing showed a man with distinctive features, the 6'2" to 6'4" height, the approximately 200-pound build, the very short black hair. It was detailed enough that anyone who knew this man should have recognized him. Yet 28 years later, this man has never been identified. Not a single person has come forward to say they recognize the sketch or know who this might be. If you're finding this as frustrating and compelling as I am, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because cases like these need to stay in the public eye. The more people who know about George's story, the higher the chance that someone with information will finally come forward. Your engagement literally helps save lives and solve cases. Here's what makes George's case even more tragic when you understand the context. In October 1993, just 4 years before George's murder, 12-year-old Polly Klaas was kidnapped from a slumber party in Petaluma, just 20 miles from where George's body would later be found. Polly's case received massive media attention, spawned nationwide searches involving thousands of volunteers, and led to significant changes in how law enforcement handles child abduction cases. The search for Polly Klaas was one of the largest missing person investigations in California history. The case made international headlines. Celebrities joined the search efforts. The FBI became involved immediately. When Polly's body was eventually found, her killer, Richard Allen Davis, was quickly identified, arrested, and ultimately sentenced to death. George's case received a fraction of that attention, and the contrast is stark and heartbreaking. The differences between the two cases reveal uncomfortable truths about how society values different victims. Polly Klaas came from a stable, middle-class family in an affluent community. Her disappearance was noticed immediately, reported instantly, and treated as the emergency it was. The community rallied around the family, the media covered every development, and law enforcement treated it as a top priority. Georgia Leah Moses was a poor black girl who had been in and out of the foster system. Her disappearance wasn't noticed for over a week. When her body was found, there was no massive volunteer search, no celebrity involvement, no international media coverage. The investigation was handled by local law enforcement without federal assistance. Tom Waits, the legendary musician who was living in the Petaluma area at the time, was so moved by Georgia's story and troubled by the lack of attention it received that he wrote a song called Georgia Lee in 1999. The haunting ballad, featured on his album Mule Variations, asks the questions that many people were thinking, but few were saying out loud. The song brought some national attention to George's case, but it wasn't enough to generate new leads or solve the murder. However, it did ensure that Georgia's name wouldn't be completely forgotten, and it introduced her story to people who might never have heard it otherwise. Angel Turner, Georgia's younger sister, has spent her adult life fighting for justice, carrying a burden that no sibling should have to bear. She was only 7 years old when Georgia was murdered, but her memories of that final night remain crystal clear. She remembers begging Georgia to take her along, remembers her sister taking extra time to braid her hair perfectly, remembers the kiss goodnight and the promise that Georgia would come back for her. As an adult, Angel has repeatedly contacted law enforcement over the years, pleading for renewed investigation into her sister's case. According to Angel, these attempts have often been met with polite dismissal or vague promises that never materialized into action. She's had to watch investigators retire without solving the case, seen evidence rooms reorganized, witnessed the case file grow cold. In recent years, Angel has found an unexpected ally that has rekindled hope for justice. Maria, a woman who was a year younger than Georgia and attended the same school in Santa Rosa, reached out after learning about the case through social media. The connection between them runs deeper than just shared memories of Georgia. Maria's father had actually worked for the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department and was part of the team that responded to the scene where Georgia's body was discovered. He had carried the weight of that investigation for years, and when Maria learned about Angel's fight for justice, she felt compelled to help. Angel has spoken openly about how she believes Georgia's race played a significant role in the lack of attention her case received. And she's backed this up with research into how missing children cases are handled differently based on the victim's demographics. Studies have shown that missing children of color receive significantly less media coverage than missing white children. The cases that do receive coverage often focus on negative aspects of the victim's background or family circumstances, while cases involving white victims tend to focus on the tragedy and innocence of the situation. If you're feeling as outraged as I am right now about these systemic failures, I need you to do something. Share this video with everyone you know. Comment below with your thoughts about how we can change these patterns. Post about Georgia's case on your social media platforms. These algorithms reward engagement, and the more people who see Georgia's story, the higher the chance that someone with information will come forward. But here's what's particularly frustrating about Georgia's specific case. Investigators have always believed that the killer knew Georgia. This wasn't a random abduction by a stranger prowling for victims. This was someone who had regular contact with a 12-year-old girl, someone who felt comfortable enough to page her and arrange meetings, someone who knew her well enough that she would get into his car without fear. The fact that he's never been identified suggests several disturbing possibilities. Either people in the Santa Rosa community are protecting him, consciously or unconsciously, or the initial investigation didn't cast a wide enough net to identify all the men who had contact with Georgia in the weeks and months before her death. What's even more troubling is thinking about what this killer might have done in the nearly 3 decades since Georgia's murder. Men who sexually assault and murder children don't typically commit one crime and then stop completely. Sexual homicides, particularly those involving children, are often part of a pattern of escalating behavior. The case has attracted attention from various true crime podcasts and television shows over the years. In 2022, the popular Crime Junkie podcast featured Georgia's case, interviewing Angel about her ongoing fight for justice and bringing renewed attention to the investigation. More recently, the case was featured in The Uncovered Serial, a podcast produced by Cal Poly that focuses on cold cases and how new technologies might help solve them. This case represents everything wrong with how missing children cases are handled when the victims don't fit a certain profile. Georgia Leah Moses was failed by multiple systems at every level. The Child Protective Services system couldn't provide her with the stability she needed. The community didn't notice when she disappeared. The media didn't make her story a priority, and the justice system couldn't solve her murder with the same urgency applied to cases involving more privileged victims. But Georgia's story isn't just about systemic failure and social injustice. At its heart, it's about a remarkable young girl who, despite facing challenges that would break many adults, remained caring, responsible, and devoted to her family. Friends and family remember Georgia as someone who would give her last dollar to help someone in need, who would stand up to bullies twice her size to protect a friend. Angel Turner has refused to let Georgia be forgotten, despite decades of frustration and disappointment. She continues to share Georgia's story at every opportunity, hoping that someone, somewhere, will finally come forward with the information needed to solve this case. The Sonoma County Sheriff's Department maintains that this is still an active investigation. They encourage anyone with information about Georgia's murder to call 70-7565-2185 or submit a tip through their website. They've emphasized that even the smallest detail, something that might seem insignificant, could be the key to finally solving this case. So here's what I want you to do after watching this video. First, hit that like button if you think Georgia's story deserves to be heard. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into cases that need continued attention. But most importantly, share this story widely. Talk about it with people in your community. Post about it on social media platforms. Georgia deserves justice. Angel deserves answers. And that killer, whoever he is, wherever he is, needs to be held accountable for what he did to a 12-year-old girl 28 years ago. Every day that passes without justice is another day that this killer remains free. potentially putting other children at risk. Don't let Georgia Leah Moses be forgotten. Don't let her become just another statistic. Don't let her killer continue to walk free. Share her story, remember her name, and keep pressure on the system to do better. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for helping to keep Georgia's memory alive. Remember, every case matters, every victim deserves justice, and every family deserves answers. Until Georgia's killer is caught, this case will never truly be closed.